So I've got this pair of balanced cables. I brought in two pairs from Japan. You might wonder, why would I bring in two pairs of balanced cables from Japan? Well, this is part of the reason here. You can see this. These are actually Accuphase cables. So these are LC-10A 1 meter is the model number. So Accuphase doesn't do anything low end. Everything Accuphase by definition is high end. I bought them because I have an Accuphase preamp. I thought it would be nice to have Accuphase cables with my preamp. But also because the standard polarity on an Accuphase preamp is reversed to standard polarity. So my DAC has a balanced output. To route it to the preamp, I needed to actually switch the hot and the cold wires inside the cable. It can actually be done in software on the DAC, but the DAC has got balanced outputs and RCA outputs, and if I switch the polarity, it switches it on the RCA as well, and the RCA is running off to a different preamp, so I'd have to remember which preamp I'm using and switch it to the right polarity, which I just didn't want to do. So I needed to get cables that I knew didn't have a molded shell that I could get apart and switch the polarity of the cable so it would be right for the preamp. So these came up. They weren't overly expensive, but as you can see, they're looking a bit old and tired. So we're going to refurbish this pair of cables and we're going to have a look inside them to see how they're built. I've already refurbished the other pair. The other pair is currently going from the DAC to the preamp. So this is the second pair that now needs to be refurbished. Just before we do, we can see a couple of things about this. First thing is that the connectors, these have ITT Canon connectors made in Japan, and they've actually got the model number on them as well, XLR-3-12C for the male. There'll be a part number here for the female as well, XLR-3-11C. And these connectors, you can actually still purchase these brand new. I noticed that Farnell has got them. They're not especially expensive. I think they were less than $20 a connector. So if I really needed to or wanted to, I could actually replace these connectors. But I don't think I need to. These come with this little colour-coded sleeve which fits into the inside of the shell. We'll see that when we take it apart. But the plastic is breaking. On the other pair, they'd completely disintegrated. They just basically weren't there anymore. There was a little stub just there. These ones may be able to be salvaged, or they may end up getting thrown away, but that's okay because we don't actually need that part. I have tested this cable, incidentally. It meters through fine. I've tested it on equipment, it works fine, but I'm not sure if you can see the pins are really, really black. So that's a problem. That needs a really good clean, and I can't really see the insides of the female, but that will need a really good clean as well. We can see how this has obviously been in equipment, because you look at how shiny this part is here that would be inside of the back panel of some piece of equipment. Then this is the bit that's outside here. Look at how scungy it is. So I know from the one I've already refurbished that this will clean up reasonably well. It won't look brand new, but it will look pretty good. So let's dive in and make a start. Yeah, I've got a feeling that these plastic pieces, I think, have probably well and truly had it. I'm not actually sure how this is supposed to come out, because on the other one that I took apart already, it had completely disintegrated. I'm thinking that this actually used to be soft once, and I'm thinking that it was probably pushed on. Yeah. No, these are definitely not going to be able to be salvaged. But that's okay, because we don't actually need that part. I think it used to be soft, like a boot, because you can see how it's moulded. This part has moulded into the shape of the clamp, and it's just gone hard over time. The new ones that you buy do come with a boot, but it doesn't look like this. And it's black. You don't get a choice of colour. There we go. So that just slides out like so. Ah, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty obvious when you look at that certainly was a boot that went in there. So you can see how black these pins are, so those will certainly need to have a good clean. Now, I'll just see if I can slide this black sleeve out of the way. So here we have our three conductors. So this one here is the shield. Now, really, really important to notice is that the shield is connected only, so the shield is earth, but it's signal earth, it's not case earth of the equipment. So it's connected to this screen, but it is not connected to this back shell. And this is quite important, because when I refurbished my first cable, I had to re-terminate the end, and I didn't have this quite as short as it had been, which meant that this ended up connecting to the shield, and that was enough to induce hum, quite noticeable hum into my system. So it's really, really important to make sure that if you pull this apart, when you put it all back together, this is properly insulated so that this shield / earth is not connected to this case. Yeah, so that's just sort of falling apart. And then, I'm not sure if you can see, but so here are our two signal conductors here. We've got a red one and a white one. It's twisted pair, obviously. And so really the question is what's different about this cable if you were to go to Farnell and buy yourself some of these connectors? Well, yes, you could make one of these cables yourself, of course. The key would be is this has got to be really high quality cable. Certainly fencing wire is not good enough. Even microfine cable is not really good enough. And so when we look at this, we can see we've got our twisted pair, and just on the end, there's kind of like a green, I don't know what you'd call it, it's like a green coating over the individual conductors. So I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to end up re-terminating this one or not. But if I were to strip this conductor back, we'd be able to see that more in detail. I could almost guarantee that if I were to meter that with a multimeter, that it's non-conductive. So what that means is that your signal wires actually act like a bunch of wires in parallel rather than one big fat wire. And I'm presuming that that's done to prevent things like eddy currents or strange currents internally to the wire. So it forces the signal to run down each individual strand rather than across strands. But because there are still a large number of strands, you want low resistance, so you get low resistance by having the larger number of strands. But I'm presuming that that's why that insulation is there. I can't think of any other reason. So yeah, that's the end of that boot. There's no way that that will be going back on. I can guarantee that. So I think what I'll do now, because it's the easiest thing to do now, is I'm going to make this back shell nice and shiny. So I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so I've got this Autosol metal polish, and I don't need to take this off the cable, so I'll just work on it down here, where I can basically work around it without the end of the connector getting in the way. It's come up pretty nicely. Poke the paste out of the holes. So if we compare that to the one I haven't done yet, you can really see the difference. So we can see the end of the screw that holds it into the back shell is quite rusty. So what I find works best for that is just some polish in there, grab the screw by this shaft and just do this. And one skin of course has roughness, so it acts a little bit like sandpaper, gives a little bit of coarseness just to help the polish work. This one was quite rusty, so we'll see how this comes up. Okay, I'm going to rinse this and see how it looks. Make sure before rinsing it, put a strainer in the sink, because if you drop the screw, that's the end of the screw. Okay, so you saw how rusty that was. This has come up just looking almost like brand new. So we just compare to there's the other connector for the other channel. Look at the difference. You know, that just looks rusty as. So, fantastic. So I've got two more, the ones for the clamp, so I'll do these two now. I'll do them the same way. Take them out of the clamp and polish those up so that they're nice and shiny as well. Okay, so these both are cleaned up and they look brand new. So that's fantastic. So now we've just got the clamp. It'll be a little bit trickier to do. It's got this green sticky gunk on it. I'm not quite sure what it is, but then I just find with this is the easiest way to do this, because it's just so small and fiddly. You can't really, that green gunk is coming off. Try to get all the surfaces. So I'll wash this off now and see whether I've got it in one go or whether it needs another go. Okay, so this has come up quite nicely. There's just a little bit of that green gunk sort of still caught in here, but it's not really a big deal because it won't be seen anyway. And most of this is just cosmetic. The back shell itself plays no role at all in the performance of the cable. So now I'll just whack these guys back in here because they're less likely to be lost when they are where they belong. Okay, so the shell's all cleaned up on this. So now we've got the problem of how black and gunky these are, and they're not meant to look like that. So the other one wasn't like this, so I didn't have to do anything to these pins. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to go about this, but I've got a few things to try. Okay, so I've got some contact cleaner, so I'm going to try this first. Just going to spray a little bit on and just see what happens if I just rub this a bit with my fingers. That's actually looking pretty encouraging. Oops. It's definitely making a difference. Okay, so that's working quite well, but I've decided I'm going to try something different anyway. I've got some deoxit D5, which I was going to apply at the end, but I thought, why not apply it now and just see, you know, it may do the job anyway. So I was going to do this at the end because the inside of this female needs cleaning. I can't get inside there, so this is the way to clean that. So this may just clean the males as well. I'm not using an angle grinder on this, it's the guy next door. This is just a strip of paper. Yeah, this is coming up quite nicely actually. If I'd have needed a little bit more force, I've got some P2000 sandpaper, but I really want to avoid using anything abrasive on this unless I absolutely have to. That looks really nice. It's just a little bit of tarnish down the bottom still, but that's far better than it was. So, I think we can put this back together now. Our sleeve there. There. Clamp. So I can tell that this clamp is not actually clamping on the cable anymore. But, you know, unless you did something stupid with it, you would be fine. And so what we need to do now is just make sure Just make sure that the shield is not connected to any of these pins. And it's not. If it was, we'd end up with hum. And I haven't done anything electrically to this, so as expected, it buzzes out perfectly. So that's one end done, and look at the difference. Now, this end looks almost new. Look at how scungy that looks. Look at the other. You know, look at this one. Look at the rust on the screw. Look at the tarnishment. Look how black those pins. Look at the difference in the pins. You know, your signal's going through those pins. So this is absolutely a must-do. So that's the male end. Now we'll do the female end. So once again, this, yeah, look at that. This sleeve is just going to completely disintegrate. Now, the female end is a little bit trickier, and the first thing to notice is that there's this shake-proof star washer on this screw, so you certainly don't want to lose that. It would be very easy to lose. It takes a bit of wiggling to get this thing out. Here she comes. Now, the other thing to notice is the latching mechanism. So it's almost inevitable that this will end up coming apart while you're working on it. It's slippery because it's full of deoxit. Okay, maybe it's not inevitable. The other one I refurbished. This spring thing fell apart and I had to put it back together. The trick is not to lose anything. So that's okay. Take the remains of this boot off. So the good thing about these boots is it tells you which cable is which. Without them, I'm not going to know. So what I did on the other one is I just put some red heat shrink around the ends of the red cable. But I'm not going to disassemble these ones, because I don't need to switch the polarity on this one, and I don't want to disassemble it just for the sake of disassembling it. So I'll work out another way of just labelling them as to which one is plus and minus. So we've now disassemble that, and you can see we're going to do the same now to this that we did to the other one. Okay, so this is this shell is being cleaned up. I'm not sure if you can see it. This one's just a little bit worse than the other one. As these corrode, you start to get little like bubbles or little round raised bits. There's one just there. It was much worse on the other set that I refurbished, but it's very fine sandpaper, just a bit of a rub like this. Can just help to take away some of that roughness. But it's not too bad, so that's what I'm going to do on this one. So that's the back shell. Just a few bits of debris in there still. Get those out. So now I'll clean up the screws. With this one, taking the shake-proof washer off first. It doesn't need to be cleaned. It's quite shiny. So now I'll clean up these 3 screws. Okay, so that's those 3 screws done. All looking good as new. So we'll do now the clamp. Okay, so clamps come up nicely, ready to go. So we'll just put this thing back together now. Now, that has to be down. There we go. So that it doesn't get caught up on the housing. That has to be down as you slide it in. Probably the trickiest part will be not losing the star washer. Just put that on there. Obviously there's a bit of magnetism in this screwdriver, which is not very helpful. There we go. Tight. So I just meter this out again. So this shouldn't be connected to this, and it's not. And inside here, none of them should be connected to that, and they're not. And that should be connected to that, and it is. And that should be connected to that, and it is. And that should be connected to that, and it is. And there's no internal shorts. So it meters out electrically. And we look at this thing, if we just compare it to the one I haven't done yet. You know, this looks Doesn't look new, but it looks pretty close. So here we have now one refurbished and ready to go. Genuine Accuphase balance cable, LC-10A.